Welcome to Minko's Corner. How you guys doing? How you guys doing today? Today we're gonna be watching another video from my Napoleonic series. Again, Epic History TV. I'm only doing Epic History at this point. Um, I hope you're gonna enjoy this video. This is Napoleon's Great Blunder, which is in Spain. You know, went to war with Spain. No reason. They were allies. Why? We'll see about that. 1808. Now, today I think I'm gonna do two videos, so stay posted for the next one. But now, let's see what's happening in Spain and his
An
mistakes.
Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor, Osprey Publishing. In the autumn of 1807, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte dominated Europe. He had humbled Austria and Prussia, and sealed an alliance with Russia. Of the major powers, only Britain still defied him, safe from invasion thanks to its powerful navy. Napoleon had ordered all territory controlled by France or its allies to stop trading with Britain, the so-called Continental System, or blockade, designed to wreck Britain's economy and force its government to make peace. But neutral Portugal had continued to trade with its historic ally Britain, so Napoleon sent an army under General Junot to occupy the country and force it into line. The invasion was supported by France's ally, Spain, though privately Napoleon held Spain's rulers in contempt. The Bourbon royal family was decadent and corrupt. The king and crown prince loathed each other, while the country was effectively run by Chief Minister Manuel Godoy.
Weren't the Bourbons the same family that was ousted in France in the French Revolution? I think I'm right
Queen's
about that.
lover. Spain, Napoleon concluded, was backwards, militarily weak and incompetently governed, and he devised a plan to seize control of the country.
Yeah, I'm bringing you democracy.
In the spring of 1808, under the pretext of guarding Spain against the British, French troops took up strategic positions around the country. The Spanish people saw the French military presence as the latest in a long line of humiliations, and held Chief Minister Manuel Godoy responsible. There were riots at the palace of Aranjuez. Godoy was nearly lynched. Napoleon invited the Spanish royal family and Godoy to take refuge in the French city of Bayonne, and sent Marshal Murat and 50,000 troops to restore order in Madrid.
Let me guess.
But on the 2nd of May 1808, the people of Madrid rose up against Murat's soldiers. It became known as the Dos de Mayo Uprising, immortalized by the artist Francisco Goya. This scene shows Mamelukes of Napoleon's Imperial Guard attacked by the
He
citizens
had
of
fucking
Madrid.
Turks in his
100
guard?
soldiers were killed. The French responded ruthlessly, shooting down dozens in the streets and executing more than 100 by firing squad. Meanwhile, in Bayonne, Napoleon forced King Carlos to abdicate and bestowed the title King of Spain on his own brother, Joseph.
I mean, at this point, it's like... from evil, yeah.
That summer, as Napoleon forced a new modernizing constitution on Spain, and his brother Joseph entered Madrid as its new king, the Spanish reacted with fury. The French weren't just arrogant foreigners trampling on their national honor. They were godless atheists who, during the French Revolution, had rejected the Pope and Catholic Church.
Of course.
Napoleon, priests warned the peasants, was the very Antichrist himself. Revolts erupted across the country. The Spanish army was joined by militias and partisans who attacked French troops and killed collaborators. French soldiers carried out savage reprisals, no mercy was shown. The countless atrocities horrified Francisco Goya and led to his famous Disasters of War series. At first, it seemed the French would easily put down the revolt. Girona, Valencia, and Zaragoza were besieged by French troops, while the Spanish army of Galicia was routed by Marshal Bessières at the Battle of Medina del Rio Seco. But 8 days later, as General Dupont and 3 French divisions withdrew from Córdoba, slowed down by wagons piled high with loot, they were surrounded at Bailén by General Castaños' army of Andalusia and forced to surrender. The Spanish took 18,000 French prisoners, about half of whom later died of starvation.
Jesus Christ.
Bailén was a humiliation for France, her first major defeat since Napoleon became emperor. France's enemies across Europe were delighted. Napoleon was incandescent with fury. The situation went from bad to worse. The Portuguese joined the revolt, while fierce Spanish resistance forced the French to abandon the sieges of Valencia, Girona, and Zaragoza. Spain's new king, Joseph Bonaparte, was even forced to flee the capital. The British assisted the revolt, which the Spanish now called a War of Independence, by shipping weapons to Spain using the Royal Navy. On the 1st of August, a small British army commanded by Sir Arthur Wellesley landed in Portugal to aid their revolt. On the 17th of August, he beat a small French force at Roliça. Then, 4 days later, beat Junot's main army.
Wait, that happened in
at the Battle of
1805?
Vinero.
Weren't we already in 1807 by the time this happened?
But Wellesley's
So
newly
while
arrived
Austerlitz was
superior,
happening,
Sir Hugh Dalrymple, then agreed to repatriate Junot and his army to France, with all their arms and plunder, using British ships. In Britain, the generous terms were seen as a disgrace and scandal. A subsequent inquiry exonerated Wellesley, the future Duke of Wellington, but Dalrymple never held command again.
man, that was his problem. He was so good that
Napoleon
but he
decided
was
the
alone.
only way
He was
to
a
sort
genius,
out the situation in Spain
but
was
he
to
couldn't
go
be
there
everywhere,
himself.
you know. So.
He assembled 130,000 reinforcements, including many of his best troops,
Yeah.
and on the 7th
Napoleon's
of
mad.
November led a second invasion of Spain. Most Spanish troops were inexperienced, were often badly equipped and led, and their armies had no coherent strategy. They were no
Fuck them up.
match for the Grande Armée, which burst across the Ebro River and inflicted heavy defeats on the Spanish at Burgos and Tudela. At Tudela, Marshal Lannes' Third Corps avenged the defeat at Bailén by smashing the army of General Castaños, sending it fleeing in 2 directions. Napoleon pushed on rapidly. North of Madrid, 8,000 Spanish held the mountain pass at Somosierra. Napoleon, impatient to break through to the capital, ordered forward the Polish Light Horse of the Guard. In an attack of almost suicidal bravery, they charged the Spanish guns head-on and enabled the French to take the pass.
Damn, those Polish, man. You know, they're loyal.
4 days later, after Napoleon threatened to obliterate the city, Madrid opened its gates to his army.
He's like, you know what, I'm blowing this shit up.
Unaware of the disaster engulfing Spanish forces, a 20,000-strong British army, commanded by Sir John Moore, had just arrived in Salamanca after a 300-mile march from Lisbon, with another smaller force en route from Coruña. The British army was inexperienced, but in contrast to most Spanish forces, it was well trained, organized, and led. As news reached Moore of the Spanish collapse, he nevertheless planned to divert French forces by attacking Marshal Soult's isolated Second Corps and threatening Napoleon's communications to Burgos and France. At Sagun on the 21st of December, the British 15th Hussars advanced overnight through winter frost and made a dawn attack on a French cavalry brigade, routing it in one great charge. But as Moore prepared a full-scale attack on Soult's corps, he received news that Napoleon was advancing rapidly towards him with his main army from Madrid. While two French corps under Marshal Lannes began a second bloody siege of Zaragoza, Napoleon saw a chance to get to grips with the British at last. Intending to trap Moore between his own forces and Soult's Second Corps, he force-marched his troops over the icy Guadarrama Pass in the midst of a blizzard.
Jesus Christ.
Moore, facing odds of more than 2 to 1, immediately ordered a retreat, planning to march 250 miles to the coast, where his army could be evacuated by the Royal Navy. For both sides, the race to the sea was an exhausting slog through mountains, mud, and bitter cold. Many fell by the wayside as British discipline collapsed, leading to looting and drunkenness, except among the rearguard, which fought several skillful delaying actions
Black Bob
and
Crawford
kept the French
too.
at bay.
I love the
Soldiers
nicknames.
of
They're
Britain's
amazing.
elite 95th Rifles were prominent in these skirmishes. This specialized light infantry regiment wore green uniforms for better concealment and were one of the few units on any side armed with rifles. Unlike the standard smoothbore musket, rifles had spiral grooves in the barrel that spun the bullet as it was fired, making them slower to load, but much more accurate. In one legendary incident during Moore's retreat at Cacabelos, rifleman Tom Plunkett picked out and shot dead a French general at 400 yards, some say further. Thanks to the skill of the rearguard and the desperate pace of the retreat, the British kept one step ahead of the French. On New Year's Eve, Napoleon received grave news from Paris. Rumours of plots, and Austria mobilizing once more for war.
Fucking Austria, man. Austria should have
The
been
Emperor
destroyed.
immediately left for France, taking many of his best troops with him, and entrusted Marshal Soult and Second Corps with finishing off the British. The pursuit continued, but on the 11th of January 1809, Moore's ragged army reached Coruña. For Sir John Moore's exhausted army, the Spanish port meant supplies, rest, and the prospect of rescue. But few ships were there to meet them on the 11th. Fortunately, the British had been able to blow up bridges behind them to delay Marshal Soult's advance. And 3 days later, on the 14th of January, the naval transports arrived, allowing Moore to begin embarking his cavalry and artillery. But the very next day, Soult's army appeared on the hills south of Coruña, taking up positions on the heights of Peñasquedo, where he sighted his main battery of cannon. Half of Moore's army deployed in a defensive line 2 miles south of the city, with 2 divisions held back to protect his right flank. Both armies were roughly 16,000 strong. The French had 4 regiments of dragoons, while the British cavalry was already aboard ship. But the broken terrain of walls, hedges, and olive trees made it a battlefield ill-suited to cavalry. Soult's plan was to attack the British right flank and trap Moore's army against the sea. Around 2 p.m, the French artillery opened fire. Then Mermet's infantry division advanced, supported by La Houssaye's dragoons on his left. Moore had been unsure if Soult would attack, and had just ordered Paget's division to begin embarkation.
Paget?
Now he hurriedly cancelled that order, ordering Paget instead to bring up his men to reinforce his open flank, and Fraser's division to take up position on the
What are those
heights of
two guys
Santa
doing on the other
Margarita.
side of the river?
The
Or of
French
the,
advanced through hedges and over walls, with heavy firing from skirmishers on both sides. Then the British counterattacked.
they're just chilling?
The 42nd Highlanders and 50th Foot charged into the village of Elvina and drove the French out. But in confused fighting, they in turn were soon pushed back to their own lines. Sir John Moore was close to the front line, observing developments, urging on officers and men.
He was killed.
But as he ordered up the Guards Brigade to reinforce the line, he was hit in the shoulder by a cannonball.
Whoa! I was
He
gonna
remained
think he was like
conscious,
he was
but
gonna
it
be
was
fine.
obvious the wound was fatal, and he was carried back to the city.
Jesus Christ! I was like, you know what? You know, shoulder. He's gonna survive. But fucking cannonball.
Soult sent forward Merle's division to support the attack on Elvina. Scottish General Sir John Hope had taken over command of the British army from the dying Moore, and he ordered forward 2 battalions of infantry to meet the French attack. Paget's division, led by skirmishers of the 95th Rifles, arrived to shore up the British right flank. The terrain was so bad for horses that French dragoons chose to dismount and fight on foot, but were slowly pushed back by the British. Paget's advance threatened the flank of Mermet's attack on Elvina, and he too was forced to withdraw, while an attack on the right by Delaborde's infantry secured a foothold in the village of Piedra Longa, but got bogged down in heavy skirmishing. Around 6 p.m, dusk fell, and firing died out across the battlefield. News that the British line had held reached Moore shortly before he died in Coruña, around 8 p.m.
Fucking cannibal.
That night, the British lit campfires and posted sentries, then silently withdrew to Coruña to begin embarkation.
Smart.
The next morning, the French found the enemy positions abandoned, but they were slow to take advantage. It wasn't until noon that they were able to bring up 6 cannon and get them into position overlooking the Bay of Coruña. The British had almost completed their evacuation by the time the French guns opened fire. In a hurried departure, a few British transports ran aground, and 2 were set on fire, but overall, losses were light. A small Spanish garrison held Coruña, waiting until the British fleet had escaped to sea, before surrendering.
John Moore. I wonder if there are any memorials, you know, like
Whether
statues.
Moore's retreat to Coruña
streets
was a
named
British
after him.
disaster or miraculous escape is still debated. And did he abandon Spain in its hour of need, or draw off Napoleon's main force, buying time for
Abandoned
others?
Spain. Oh, what the
Either
fuck
way,
was he supposed
Britain's
to do?
only army had been saved and would return to fight
Only
another
army?
day, while Napoleon now
No,
faced the
their
prospect of a
only
long
army?
war on the Iberian
Dude.
Peninsula and renewed conflict with Austria, a war on 2 fronts that would challenge his empire like never before. Napoleon had blundered in Spain,
No
but
shit.
it was years before the scale of his mistake was evident. Then he would say, "I embarked pretty badly on this affair, I admit it. The immorality showed too obviously. The injustice was too cynical. The whole of it remains very ugly." If you'd like to learn more about
Yeah, I mean, it was a hubris. You know, because he didn't have to do it. They were his allies. You know, Portugal was taken over. I don't know. And how many brothers does he have? You know, he gave a kingdom to his brother in the Netherlands, then in Westphalia, then in fucking Naples, and then in Spain. Is it like the same? Like one of the brothers, gives up a smaller kingdom to get a bigger one, or the guy has like 15 brothers, and he's like, you know what, King of Spain, King of Naples, King. By the way, the guy, I think there was one brother who was made King of Australia. Australia, was it Westphalia or Württemberg? A smaller kingdom basically, and like all his brothers like King of Spain, King of Holland, King of Naples, and like the guy is like the small king of this very insignificant nation. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I did. We learned that when you're at the height of your power, don't make stupid mistakes for no reason. You know, like just hold on. Think about it because, and then of course he's going to Russia, so talk about big mistakes. But anywho, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So yeah, see ya.